Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Podcast by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin and I am on my own today. Today I'm doing Group K of African Cup 2023 qualification, which is already underway. And we actually did a series on teams of the African Cup 2021. That was in January of this year, 2022. We did groups and players there. Excuse me. So we'll be changing our format a bit as a result. Rather than repeating what we podcasted there about the groups, we'll be providing a link in the show notes, as well as the times at which each team was discussed in the podcast. So interested listeners can go to soccerfiles.captivate.fm, or you can just type Soccer Files Canada, perhaps. Soccer Files is with a PH in the middle and an S at the end. Soccer Files Canada, and that'll bring you to the website. And on the website, you can click on the show notes to bring up that information. So we're going to repeat, or I'm going to repeat that address at the end. And that information is, in fact, a more detailed World Cup overview and a detailed look at the finals of the African Cup tournaments, which we'll only cover briefly here. So this time we'll be focusing on African Cup qualifying campaigns, particularly a deep dive into that, and the recent history of all the teams. But for the teams that were in the African Cup, that would just be Morocco here. There's more information available. So let's look at this podcast today, and we're going to cover it in three sections. And section one is a look at who is in the group, an introduction to the teams, which pot they came from, and some geographical information about each country. Part two is the longest part by far, a team-by-team overview with a quick review of their participation and major achievements, an overview of their African Cup history and World Cup history, if they weren't done in the previous series. But for all teams, a deep dive into their African Cup qualifying history and a summary and sense of their recent form, with a short section on their players, particularly who's been scoring goals for them. Part three, we'll end with a comparison of the teams by looking at their ELO rankings and head-to-head meetings, and that'll launch us into a bit of a discussion of their prospects and our predictions. And for this series, we can actually check how accurate we are by checking the first two sets of the six-set qualification, those two sets having taken place in June. So I actually haven't looked at the results, so I can kind of make a valid prediction on the game and then kind of check it for fun to see if things are working out as expected. Okay, and then at the end, we'll again provide the address for you to go to if you want to delve into more on the international soccer preview here. So today I'm wearing black for no particular reason. I guess I'm kind of a referee. I'm trying hard to be objective, but the thing is, Morocco is playing Canada in the World Cup in the same group. So it's taking all of my nerve and strain to try to be objective about these things. So yeah, if I kind of go off the rails and start hoping for Morocco players to get injured, that's not very nice of me, I know, and so I will try to behave myself. Okay, no, I actually like Morocco, especially now, because I feel like in the last the last couple of campaigns, they've been a bit more exciting than they were in the past 10 years or so. Okay, well, let's begin by looking at the teams, and a bit of a surprise here. It's Morocco in pot one, South Africa in pot two. Zimbabwe was supposed to be in pot three, but like Kenya, they've been disqualified. The Kenya disqualification took us by surprise. We didn't know about it until we actually looked at the scores. Connor was doing that podcast with me, and we were taken by surprise. This one I actually saw on the FIFA ranking website that they had been suspended, so not a part of this group. So we won't be covering them. But from pot 4 came Liberia, so it's just the 3 teams now: Morocco, South Africa, and Liberia, with 2 of them going through. All right, well, let's take a look at the geographical information. Morocco is about 446,000 kilometers squared. It's the 25th largest country in Africa, there in the northwestern part of Africa. And the population is 36.9 million. That's from 2020 statistics. Putting them 11th in Africa. So 25th biggest by size, but 11th biggest by population. South Africa is quite a bit bigger, about 3 times bigger, 1.22 million square kilometers, making it the 9th biggest country in Africa, and a population of 60.1 million in 2021, putting it as the 5th most populous country in Africa. And finally, Liberia, just 111,000 square kilometers, the 39th big. Oh my goodness, for the YouTube viewers, I have a map, and I forgot to scroll down to the map. Liberia in Western Africa, and most of has a lot of coastline in Western Africa, but it's a small country, the 39th biggest in South Africa, a population of 4.7 million in 2021, the 37th in Africa. So just by comparison, South Africa is the biggest of these countries, both in population and in size. In terms of size, Morocco is about one third as big, maybe a little bit more, maybe 2/5 as big, and a population of 36.9 compared to 60.1, so a little more than half as many people. Liberia, by comparison, is much smaller than both of them, about 1/10 of the size of South Africa, and even less in terms of population, 4.7 million. So South Africa, the biggest country there. But we're going to start with Morocco, because they came from pot 1. And their first international game was in 1957. And their nickname is the Lion de l'Atlas, the Atlas Lions. And they are, of course, named after the Atlas Mountains in Morocco. So we'll begin with a look at their participation and achievements, kind of an overview. They began qualifying in 1962 for the World Cup. And after joining the general Asian African boycott of the 1966 World Cup, they have participated consistently from 1970. African Cup participation got off to a rocky start, withdrawing in 1962, joining their first in 1963, but then not entering 3 of the 5 subsequent tournaments, and only participating consistently since 1967. And they were disqualified in 2015 because of withdrawing from hosting. We'll give a little more information about that when we do the deep dive into qualifying. In terms of achievement, they've reached the World Cup 5 times. A round of 16 finish in 1986 is their best result, and otherwise they haven't passed the group stage. Sorry, yes, I got a bit confused there. Okay, they won their only African Cup in 1976 and have finished in the top 4 4 times. Okay, sorry about that. I kind of lost my information for the African Cup. Now, for the World Cup, we're going to skip the overview that can be found in the January podcast, but we are going to look at their most recent campaign in 2022. So they received a bye in round 1. That was a preliminary round that only the bottom 28 teams had to play. In the round 2 of 3 group stage, they won all games over Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, and Sudan to finish way out in first. They had 18 points, and the next second place team, Guinea-Bissau, had 6. So 3 times as many. They were imperious, and the campaign was uneventful in terms of games. But they did travel to Guinea, only to find themselves waking up the next day to gunfire in the street and civil war. An interesting story there. The final playoff round proved equally easy. So they moved to round 3, which was just a playoff, a knockout with one team, and they were faced with Congo DR, which was one of the easier teams reaching that knockout round, and they made it look easy with a tie in the first leg and a 4-1 win in the second. So they advanced to the World Cup, where, as I mentioned, they are grouped with Canada, making them the enemy, the temporary enemy. Okay, that is the World Cup, and now we'll look at the African Cup. And a brief overview of their African Cup history is we're going to skip, because that was done before, and rather we'll go to the detailed deep dive into their qualifying history. So we've divided this into 4 parts, and the first part covers 1962 to 1978. They first entered in 1962, and they were slated to play Tunisia, but they withdrew. But it was the same opponent in 1963, and they traded home wins, losing 4-1 on the road, but winning 4-2 at home. A tight battle, but they allowed 2 goals at home, and so were knocked out on goal difference. Now, they didn't enter in 1965 and in 1968, so their second campaign was in 1970, and they returned to a really similar result against Algeria. They lost by more away than they won at home, and were again knocked out on goal difference. 1972 saw them with the same pairing with Algeria. And I think they won on goal difference, but I'm just going to check because my notes aren't clear enough. Yes, they won the first round, losing 3-1 away, but then winning 3-0 at home. So that 1 goal in Algeria made the difference, and that moved them on to play Egypt in the next round, and they beat them the same way on goal difference to reach their first cup. However, in 1974, they didn't enter, and 1976 saw them pass 3 rounds of knockout qualification, winning both legs over Gambia, then beating Senegal on goal difference, and then in the final round, they beat Ghana on penalties after each team had won 2-0 at home. This brought them to their second cup, and they went all the way to win the title. And that title win in 1976 qualified them automatically for the 1978 edition. So that's their early history, and the next part covers 1980 to 1996. In 1980, they bested Mauritania in the first knockout round, and then round 2 started with a 7-0 home win. Over Togo. So it really didn't matter what happened in the away leg. They lost 2-1, but could have afforded more. It was an easy qualification there for their 4th cup, where they earned their second best result with a 3rd place finish. However, they failed to qualify for the next 2 cups, winning both legs of the first round over Liberia, who they face here in 1982, including a surprise 5-0 win away. They fell to Zambia on goal difference in the following round. Just making sure of that information. Okay, that was 1982. 1984 saw them beat Mali on goal difference in round one, but tie Nigeria with 2 goalless draws. But Nigeria won in the end in a penalty shootout. However, 1986 saw them back in the cup. They were forfeited the first round by Sierra Leone's withdrawal, and they bested Zaire in the second round. Zaire is now Congo DR. Reaching the cup, they earned fourth place in that cup, and the next one in 1988 they qualified for automatically by hosting. But what followed was a weak period where they only reached one of the next 4 cups after 1988. 1990 saw them ousted by Mali. The 2 tied home and away, but scoreless in Mali and 1-1 in Morocco. So Mali got the away goal they needed to pass. 1992 came with an expansion of the cup and a switch to a group-based qualification system. They won the first 3 games all at home, but then lost to Niger and Ivory Coast on the road to finish second. That was enough, though, to get them into the cup, but they fell at the group stage. In 1994, it was kind of a middling qualification, but they were ultimately undone by a loss at home to last place Malawi, and they finished third, though only a point behind first place Mali. That makes Malawi one of the few countries to actually win in Morocco. And it was an embarrassment that their pristine home record, actually it was their first ever loss in African Cup qualification at home, and embarrassing that it was blemished by a fairly weak team. Anyway, moving on to 1996, they were undefeated at home, but they failed to reach the cup again, coming third behind Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast. Part 3, 1998 to 2010. Okay, that didn't happen again. I'm talking about a non-qualification until 2010. So 1998 started a string of successful qualifications. 1998 saw them go undefeated through the campaign, starting with ties in Egypt and Senegal, while winning all the rest for a commanding first-place finish in a fairly tough group, I might add. 2000 was less convincing with a draw at home to Togo, but still undefeated in the campaign for a first-place finish. 2002 saw them beaten home and away by Gabon, another kind of weak team, damaging their home record there. They nevertheless finished first, while Gabon finished third. The 2004 African Cup was hosted by rivals Tunisia, and they showed determination in reaching it, suffering only an away draw in Sierra Leone. There they reached the final, where they faced Tunisia, but the host got the better of them. 2006 and 2010 were both based on results from World Cup qualifying campaigns, and their second place finish behind Tunisia in 2006 cost them the World Cup, but it was easily enough for the African Cup. After a solid, if easy, qualification in 2008 over Zimbabwe and Malawi, their disastrous 2010 World Cup campaign, which saw them finish last in the group behind Gabon and Togo, prevented them from reaching the 2010 African Cup. All right, and now we move on to the last section, 2012 to 2017. So they started 2012 with a home draw with the weak but well-performing Central African Republic. They tied the upstarts away too, but ended up finishing first over them. Only the top team qualifying that year. 2013 featured a quick qualification as the African Cup moved to odd-numbered years, and 2012 participants, somewhat unfairly, received a bye to the third and final round of qualification. So Morocco only had to beat Mozambique to qualify, but they nevertheless flirted with danger by losing 2-0 away in the first leg, but made up for it with a 4-0 win at home. They were scheduled to host in 2015, but they withdrew over fears of the Ebola virus. CAF, the football regulation, Association of African Football, ruled that this reason was specious. They didn't buy it, and they banned Morocco for 2 tournaments, but later reduced it to just 1 tournament, the 2015. So banned in 2015. They thus entered the 2017 edition and suffered only an away draw in Libya to comfortably qualify. All right, let's move on to their recent campaigns in the African Cup 2019. So there they finished first in their qualifying group, ahead on goal difference of Cameroon. They won all home games, but they were winless on the road, losing to Cameroon and tying Comoros and Malawi, fairly weak teams. Unconvincing they were in the group stage, eking out wins over Namibia and South Africa, only on last-minute goals, the only goals of the games. But they did well they did well to beat Ivory Coast and finished first in the group stage with maximum points. So 3 1-0 wins there, 2 of them on late goals. They went to the round of 16, but shamefully lost to Benin on penalties, despite being given a late penalty and a man advantage in that game. So a bit of a flat performance there by Morocco. Let's hope they are flat in the World Cup against Canada. Okay, I'm sorry I said that. That's terrible. Okay, African Cup 2021. They started the qualifying campaign weekly with a home draw against Mauritania, and they ended up tying them away too. But otherwise, they beat Central African Republic and Burundi to comfortably finish first in a very easy qualifying group there. In the cup, they finished first in the group stage, beating a poorly performing Ghana. And they also beat Comoros, and in the final game tied Gabon, but nevertheless finished first over Gabon. Ghana finished last in the group, believe it or not. They beat Malawi in the round of 16, but then they lost to Egypt in extra time of the quarterfinals. Their actual performance was better than their result in this cup. They were a bit unfortunate to meet eventual finalist Egypt there, but I thought they were quite good in this African Cup. Okay, and that is 2021. So they come into the World Cup in fairly fine form, and I was hoping in the draw, to be honest, that Canada would be paired with or grouped with Tunisia rather than Morocco, because I feel like Morocco is in pretty good form. Let's take a look at some of their players here. Who is scoring for them? Well, we see in 2019 and in 2021 qualifying, Hakim Ziyech, who plays for Chelsea, is there. But in fact, he was not in the African Cup and hasn't played for Morocco for a while. Apparently some dispute with the coach is keeping him out of the team. So I'm sure fans will be hoping they patch that up before the World Cup. Meanwhile, they have Youssef En-Nesyri. He's not a forward. He's listed as a forward here, but he plays for Sevilla in Spain. And one guy who started scoring for them not recently, he's got 2 goals in the last 3 campaigns, but is Ashraf Hakimi. He's actually a defender, but he takes free kicks, and he has 8 goals for them in 51 games. So yeah, he has started scoring for them recently. I was right. He plays for Paris Saint-Germain. In terms of the teams they play for, they are with some pretty big teams. Defender Nusser Mazraoui plays for Bayern Munich, and we mentioned Sevilla before. Their goalie Yassine Bounou also plays for Sevilla, and there's really no small teams. None of them, no, just a handful of them play in Morocco, but it would be for big teams in Morocco like Wydad Casablanca. And yeah, well, we're going to do a player podcast on the World Cup upcoming, and we did a player podcast if you want more details. But I'll just say Morocco has a lot of talent available, which frightens me, makes me shudder as a Canadian fan. There. So in summary, let us go to the summary and a look at their recent form. And the 1976 African Cup win doesn't coincide with good results in the World Cup. And their impressive 1986 World Cup campaign only roughly coincides with 2 fourth-place finishes in a row in the 1986 and 1988 African Cups. So that has to be considered their peak, although we have seen 4th place, especially at host, although 4th place is really not a great achievement. Basically, you can win a quarterfinal game and achieve 4th place. So, in truth, the peaks for Morocco are more like rolling hills. And other than 2nd place in the 2004 African Cup, their career has been more of a valley, though only with one gorge. Okay, the geographic references are getting too much here. But only kind of one really poor period, a period in the early 90s where they missed 3 out of 4 African Cups. I'm continuing though with the geographical references because they are on a high place in recent time, a high plane. They have reached 2 World Cups in a row, something they only did once before, and they passed the group stage of the African Cup 3 times in a row, which actually is something that they've never done in the past. So it's based more on consistency than on reaching great heights. The group stage of the World Cup and the quarterfinals of the African Cup, the furthest they have scaled. They're just finished with a geographical mountaineers will be happy with my metaphors there. Okay, moving on to the next team, the South Africa. And their nickname is Bafana Bafana, which means the boys, the boys twice, the boys in isiZulu. The name was apparently coined by a journalist, Sibusiso Nsalaku, in 1992. Sorry, I'm sorry to that reporter for what I have done to his name in the pronunciation of his name. Okay, South Africa's first international game was in 1924. Their tournament history began with one of them as the 4 founding members of CAF, the Confederation of African Football. Only those members, Sudan, Ethiopia, Egypt, and South Africa, took part in the tournament in 1957. But even at that point, South Africa was disqualified. South African law would only allow an all-white or an all-black team, and it led to the other members of CAF disqualifying them. Actually, I'm not sure if they were disqualified or dropped out in 1957. The history is a bit unclear, but they were expelled from CAF and also from FIFA, basically until they were willing to give up their apartheid laws. So they played in no tournaments until the apartheid policy was repealed in 1991. Apartheid meaning that blacks and whites have to be separated. So from 1994, though, they began competing in the World Cup and African Cup, and they've never missed an edition. In terms of achievement, they've reached the World Cup 3 times, including when they hosted in 2010. The other 2 times were in 1998 and 2002, 2 cups in a row. I actually was in Korea and I saw them play a game in Busan in 2002. They were playing Slovenia. Now I'm lost in my script. Oh, yes. In 2010, no, in none of the tournaments did they ever pass the group stage. And in 2010, they became the only host nation ever to fail to do so. They have won 1 African Cup title, and that was when they hosted in 1996, shortly after returning to the fold. And they finished in the top 3 for 3 tournaments in a row around that time. Outside of that, though, the quarterfinals is their best result. Now, we did not cover them earlier this year, so we're going to give a quick World Cup overview. In their first World Cup entry in 1994, they fell in the first round to Nigeria. However, they quickly became a regional power and qualified for the next 2 cups. And as I said, falling at the group stage in both cups. They didn't qualify in 2006, but they did in 2010 by dint of being host. As mentioned, they became the first host to be knocked out of the group stage, and they've never really come close to qualifying since. They narrowly failed to reach the final playoff in 2014, but they were weak in the final round in 2018. We'll take a quick look at their recent campaign for 2022. And they received a bye in round 1, a preliminary round where only the bottom 28 teams in Africa played. A much better road performance this time than in previous campaigns. They won all home games, and they beat Ethiopia and tied Zimbabwe on the road. However, that only earned them a second-place finish because in the last game, they lost on a single goal in Ghana, and they were very bitter about it. It allowed Ghana to leapfrog them into first. The 2 ended up actually tied on points and on goal difference, but Ghana advanced on having scored more goals. But South Africa was livid about the penalty decision in the game against Ghana at 31 minutes. And I've seen the replay of it, and it is a very soft penalty. But they went further to say that, the refereeing in general favored Ghana, and they went as far as calling it match fixing. But the matter was never investigated. Or if it was investigated, they didn't agree with South Africa, and South Africa had to put up with the second-place finish and didn't advance to the final round. Ghana, on the other hand, did, and they won their set to reach the World Cup. All right, let's go into the African Cup overview of the African Cup before we look at qualifying in detail. So the African Cup shows the same pattern, but it begins with them in the first tournament in 1957, where they were disqualified for their apartheid policy. Again, I'm not dead clear that they were disqualified or whether they pulled out, but nevertheless, it's clear they were banned until their return in 1994. Where they failed to qualify for the African Cup that year. However, they hosted in 1996, and having won as host in 1996, they qualified automatically in 1998. So, yes, I'm getting a little lost. I'll just kind of wing it here. Okay, so they actually passed the group stage for 4 cups in a row from 1996 to 2002, but they slowly declined. reaching the next three cups from 2004 to 2008, but getting knocked out in the first round. And finally, in 2010 and 2012, they didn't qualify for the cup. It's been a bit up and down since then, but we'll get to that in World Cup qualifying detail. Okay, so the first part covers 1957, but really 1994 to 2004. So I mentioned the situation in 1957 and the ban, so I'll pick it up with their return in 1994, which was an inauspicious start, losing 4-1 to Zimbabwe in their very first game back, and 0-1 at home, losing 1-0 at home to Zambia. So I'm just going to bring it up so I can be clear. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, they had two home draws with the weak Mauritius in 1994, and oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Yeah, okay. They drew at home with Mauritius and at home with Zimbabwe. Those were their only home results, and an away win in Mauritius in the last game. For a pretty grim opening campaign, they finished in third ahead of Mauritius. But they improved abruptly from there, qualifying automatically as host in 1996 and winning the title. And then they qualified automatically as defending champions in 1998, as we've said. And they brought their success forward for a second place finish there. That looked good going into their second qualification campaign in 2000. But though they won all games at home, they were winless on the road, tying the weak Mauritius as well as Angola and losing to Gabon in that campaign. It was first place, though, and they qualified for the Cup, and they did better in the Cup with another good finish. 2002 and 2004 were more convincing campaigns, going undefeated through them both. Three ties, including one in the last game against Congo, saw them finish second behind Liberia in 2002, although it was an advancing spot. And in 2004, it was first place over Ivory Coast, an away tie, the only points they dropped in that campaign, an away tie with Ivory Coast, that is. Okay, and now we move to 2006 to 2017. Though qualification campaigns had improved from 2000 to 2004, their results in the Cup had declined. And after a third place finish in 2000, they were knocked out they reached only the quarterfinals in 2002, and they were knocked out of the group stage from 2004 to 2008. In 2006, qualifying was based on World Cup results for those years, for 2006 and 2010. South Africa finished third in their group in 2006, which just got them into the Cup, the top three in each group qualifying for the African Cup. However, in the Cup, as mentioned, it was another group stage finish, and in fact, they lost all of their games in the group stage of 2006. A middling qualification campaign in 2008 saw them finish behind Zambia, and they did reach the Cup, though. Yes, they reached the Cup, finishing second behind Zambia. And In 2010, they went through World Cup qualifications. They were actually hosts for the 2010 World Cup, so they didn't need to qualify for that. But they did go through qualification in order to reach the African Cup. And actually, they didn't reach it. They finished far behind Nigeria and were not one of the second place finishers to advance. So they finished second, but it still wasn't good enough. Nor would they qualify in 2012 due to a terrible miscalculation. Winning both games at home in Egypt, they had Sierra Leone. They tied Sierra Leone and Egypt on the road, going into their fourth game of six. In the fifth game, though, they lost in Niger, and they went into the last game at home, confident that a tie against Sierra Leone would see them through. And then they earned that tie, only to learn afterwards that it wasn't enough. And in fact, they had needed a win. So Niger finished on top with South Africa in second. And South Africa was not among the 5 second place finishers to advance. So a terrible miscalculation cost them the 2012 African Cup. 2013 gave them automatic qualifications as they once again hosted, and 2015 was a fairly solid qualification, and they actually knocked Nigeria out that year. 3 wins and 3 draws, 2 of them at home, was enough for first place in 2015. 2017 was a weak campaign, though, tying all games at home and finishing third behind Mauritania. So, as I said in the overview, kind of up and down since 2013. It was quarterfinals, then knocked out in the group stage, then a failure to qualify. Let's see how they've done since. Okay, in 2019, they had a pretty good campaign. They went undefeated and they bested Nigeria and actually beat them away in the opening game and then tied them at home. And they finished second in the group qualifying behind Nigeria despite besting them. They went undefeated but tied Libya at home and also tied the weak Seychelles away. So 3 out of 6 ties, not enough to get them past Nigeria. Nevertheless, they qualified in second place, and in the cup, in the group stage, they lost to Ivory Coast, but in the second game, they beat Namibia, and in game 3, they played Morocco, who they meet here, and they lost on a goal at 90 to finish third in the group stage. So like Morocco, it was 1-0 all the way. But in the case of South Africa, it was 2 losses by a score of 1-0. However, they managed to pass in third place there. And there in the round of 16, it was another 1-0 win, but a glorious one, knocking out host Egypt until meeting Nigeria in the quarterfinal and going out on a late goal against Nigeria, that goal coming at 89 to knock them out. Okay, moving on to the African Cup 2021. So a quarterfinal finish in 2019, pretty good. But 2021 was another disappointment for South Africa. They came in as the second seed, but they were ousted by Sudan in the final game, where kind of memories of 2012. They only needed a draw to advance, but actually lost that final game in Sudan. Otherwise, they went defeated at home, tying Ghana. But they lost on the road in Ghana and, of course, in that final game in Sudan. So that left them third place in the group, with Ghana and Sudan moving on to the African Cup, and South Africa not. All right, so let's take a look at some of their players, and we see Percy Tau he's a player I really liked seeing in the 2019 African Cup, and he was supposed to play in Britain with Southampton. I was kind of waiting for him to show up, and I think he did. He did briefly, but I think there was some passport issues or something with him that prevented him from playing for a long time. Anyway, he's with Al Ahly in Egypt now, and he has 34 caps for them, but a pretty good scoring record with 13 goals. I'm just looking for other names that are jumping out among their scorers, but honestly, they seem to be kind of a different group of scorers all the time. Perhaps Teboho Mokoena deserves mention, but yeah, he's actually a midfielder, and he, along with, I would say, about 2/3 of the players play in South Africa. They have a pretty good league in South Africa, so players are less kind of motivated to play abroad. They do have a couple of players playing in Portugal, and I mentioned Percy Tau for Al Ahly. And I'm not seeing a lot of veterans on their team. Yeah, and I gotta say, like, a lot of these players aren't very familiar to me. So perhaps they're kind of in a rebuilding phase. I think it was Thembikosi Lorch who scored that goal against against Egypt, that late goal against Egypt. No, I'm going back to it and finding that it was, it was Lorch who scored that late goal against Egypt to knock them out of the African Cup that they hosted. So a bit of glory for him there. But honestly, not a lot of big players on the team, not even a lot of players that I recognize from 2019. So I'm wondering if some of them have retired and that South Africa's in a bit of a rebuilding phase. Well, we'll see how that goes, but we can only look to the past in terms of what to expect. So I'll finish with a summary and an overview of their form. So after a brief period of great power following their return from the long ban, they looked like they would become an African power. Since 2002, though, they have been in a steady decline. They had reached the World Cup twice in 1998 and 2002, but they've never reached it again, other than by dint of hosting in 2010. They finished in the top four for 3 cups in a row, but as I said, fell to getting knocked out in the group stage and then fell further to not qualifying. And then it's kind of been up and down since then. So they still offer hope with some good campaigns. And there actually doesn't seem to be any reason why they shouldn't be a top team in Africa. They're one of the biggest countries in Africa, and they have good players. But as it is right now, they seem like kind of the China of Africa, kind of repeatedly disappointing high expectations, but with a sense, thanks in part to a flourishing national league, that they could emerge and become a continental powerhouse, or the continental powerhouse that they hope to be, kind of China in the same boat over in Asia there. In terms of form, as hinted above, there perhaps too much should not be made of their failures. Perhaps too much is made of their failures. They have been thwarted at the last step in several campaigns, almost to a comical degree. They seem to be on the rise. They seemed to be on the rise with the quarterfinal finish in the 2019 African Cup, where they gloried in knocking out host Egypt. But a loss in Sudan in the last game of the 2021 African Cup qualifying was gutting. But it's not a major lapse, as some have called it, because Sudan are a tough team at home. They were also tied on top with Ghana in 2022 World Cup qualifying, and ultimately lost on a very soft penalty in a game which they called out as being fixed. The penalty, though, was 31 minutes in, so it wasn't like it was a last-minute penalty. Anyway, these are bad results in good performances, and if they balance out over time, South Africa can expect better results. All right, well, the third team is Zimbabwe, or was to be Zimbabwe, but since they're disqualified from the Cup, we move on to the pot 4 team, Liberia, nicknamed Lone Star, or I've heard the Lone Star. I'm not sure which one it is. We'll begin with an overview of their. And by the way, I have a number of American listeners, so it's kind of an interesting flag. Liberia has a very interesting history. It was established by Americans, primarily Black Americans, looking for liberty. So moving back to Africa and looking for liberty in a very interesting history, and also hoping to, influence Africa towards democracy and stuff like that. And that's why their flag looks like an American flag, but just with one star on it rather than the 52 stars. So that kind of gives the logic to the nickname, the Lone Star or Lone Star. It's as if they're an American state outside of America, or at least started that way. Okay, let's take a look at their participation and achievements. They first completed a qualification in the World Cup in 1966, but withdrew as part of the African-Asian boycott. They did not enter, though, again until 1982 and participated consistently, except for 1994 when they withdrew. Their history in the African Cup started in 1968, but was patchy. They entered next in 1978 and then in 1982, not entering 5 editions between those campaigns. They withdrew again in 1984 and 1992, but apart from those withdrawals, they participated consistently since 1982. Okay, in terms of achievement, they've never reached the World Cup. They reached the final round of qualification 3 times in a row from 1998 to 2006, coming close only in 2002. That mirrored their best period in the African Cup too, qualifying in 1996 and in 2002, though they never got beyond the first round. By far, their most famous player is George Weah, or George Way, I've heard it pronounced. He was European and World Player of the Year in 1995 and was also voted African Player of the Century. I'll give a little bit of biographical information when we get to the detailed qualifying. But anyway, in short, it was George Weah who lifted them to the heights that they reached during that strong period. Okay, we didn't cover them in the recent African Cup, so we'll give a quick World Cup overview. After being knocked out in early rounds in their first 2 campaigns, that would be 1982 and 1986, they enjoyed a competitive one, fairly competitive, in 1990. They finished second in round 1 behind Egypt, and they went on to a final knockout round. I should say they challenged Egypt. Good Lord, I need to check it now because 1990. Okay, sorry. They won a preliminary round over Ghana, and the next round was a group stage, and they finished second behind Egypt, beating Egypt at home. So a pretty competitive campaign in 1990. Egypt then went on to a knockout round to reach the World Cup. 2002 was legitimately close, finishing just a point behind Nigeria, who qualified directly for the Cup. They reached the final rounds of World Cup qualifying in 1998 and 2006, making it a relatively strong period, but they finished in the bottom half of those groups, and then campaigns became weaker after 2006. We'll take a look at their most recent campaign in 2022. So they were among the bottom 28 teams required to play in the preliminary round. And their FIFA ranking was 152, while Sierra Leone was much higher at 114. Having won the first game at home, they would have lost through the second game had Sierra Leone not missed a penalty in injury time. As it was, they did well to overcome the higher ranked Sierra Leone, and they advanced to the main round. However, there they proved no match for Nigeria and Cape Verde, losing all games to them. But they did beat third-seeded Central African Republic twice to finish ahead of them in third place. So they came in as the bottom seed, but finished first, which is not terrible, but not a challenging campaign either. Okay, let's move on to the African Cup and give a brief overview of their history there. African results were poor until George Weah burst onto the scene. I shouldn't have put it that way because he didn't really burst onto the scene, but I'll get to that later. Anyway, the results were poor until George Weah's influence was felt, I'll say, and led them through an undefeated campaign to the African Cup in 1996. I think they might have lost their last game there, but we'll check. They didn't live up to those heights, though, although they did enjoy more competitive campaigns. It took them until 2002 to reach the African Cup again. As in 1996, reaching the Cup proved their limit, and despite a few points in each, they did not pass the group stage. Competitiveness was limited to a few home points after 2002, and they never threatened the advancing teams until 2017, when they just finished a point out of second place and an advancing spot. So we'll take a deep dive into their history, and section 1 goes from 1968 to 1994. Okay. So their first campaign in 1968 saw them in a qualifying group, a group which was not common at the time. It was usually a knockout. They earned home draws with Senegal and Guinea, but they lost both away games and finished last in the group. They didn't enter the next 3 editions, but returned in 1976, where they lost both legs to Togo and were knocked out quickly. 2 more non-entries followed, and their third campaign was in 1982. They did better there, tying Gambia 0-0 at home and 1-1 away, and the away goal saw them through to the next round. In the next round, though, they lost 3-1 away and 5-0 at home for an ignominious exit at the hands of Morocco, who they meet here. They were set to play Benin in 1984, but they withdrew. However, they did play in 3 editions after 1984. A 3-1 home leg in the first, a 3-1 home win in the first leg against Mauritania in 1986 seemed hopeful, but then they lost 3-0 away to go out on goal difference. They were bested by Sierra Leone in a preliminary round in 1986 and lost both legs to Mali at the same stage in 1990. 1992 was the year that qualification changed to a group format, but they withdrew from the 5-team grouping they were placed in before playing any games that year. However, in 1994, they started respectably, earning a draw in Burkina Faso, and at home with Tanzania. However, both of those teams withdrew, and it effectively became a knockout with the remaining team, Ghana. And unsurprisingly, they lost home and away to the strong Ghana. All right, the next section deals with 1996 to 2004. Things changed completely with the team built around superstar George Weah. And actually, he played for the team from 1986. His first qualifying campaign was in 1988. And unbelievably, his career ultimately spans from 1986 to 2018, when at 51 years old and now president of Liberia, he played in a memorial friendly against Nigeria in 2018. But really, he effectively retired in 2003 and was, though only according to some sources, a player manager in his last 3 years with the team. That's around 2000 to 2003. And I'll just add his son, Timothy Weah, is with the US national team and is actually becoming a fairly big name on that team. I'm not really sure what the connection is there with the why he's playing with the US rather than with Liberia, for example. But anyway, he is becoming quite a big name. Okay, so the first campaign in 1996 was the best. No, that's not his first campaign. Anyway, the campaign in 1996 was the best, going undefeated through 8 games of a 5-team group, which was actually supposed to be 6 teams, but Guinea-Bissau had withdrawn. In 1996, they tied all road games, but in truth, the campaign was a close battle with 1 point separating them. Tunisia ahead and Senegal behind. So, but they made it through to the Cup. But they didn't in 1998, which was close. But 2 losses to Togo ultimately condemned them to a 3rd place finish behind Togo and Congo DR. And they fell short again in 2000, where they lost all away games for a 3rd place finish, though they had beaten Uganda and Tunisia at home, as well as tying Algeria. However, 2002 returned them to the Cup with a solid campaign. Despite being bested by South Africa, they won all other games and finished first. So their appearance at the final marked the end. Their appearance in the finals, I think in the group stage there, marked the end for George Weah. And in 2004, they won at home over Niger and Ethiopia, but lost all other games for a last place finish. So it marked the end of Liberia's competitiveness for a long time. Entry into the 2006 and 2010 African Cups were based on World Cup qualifications in those years, and last place finishes in their group, in a 6-team group in 2006, denied them entry. 2008 in between was similar, where a home win over Rwanda and a home draw with Equatorial Guinea did not lift them out of bottom spot. Nor did going undefeated at home in 2012. 2013 was a shortened qualification system, starting with 2 knockout rounds. They bested Namibia in the first of these, but then were bested by Nigeria in the second and failed to make the Cup yet again. They plumbed new lows in 2015, exchanging home wins with the lowly Lesotho and going out on goal difference in the preliminary round. Lesotho actually scored in the home leg just 2 and 5 minutes in, and that turned out to be all the goals they needed. From those depths, though, they rose up for a competitive campaign in 2017, beating Tunisia at home and tying Togo there, as well as 2 wins over the weak Djibouti. It was a good campaign. However, it only earned them 3rd place, a teeth-grindingly 1 point behind 2nd place Togo. They went undefeated at home too in 2019. Wait, slam on the brakes. We're going to take a look at that in more detail here. So let's look at 2019, and there we see that it's all home wins. It's all undefeated at home, beginning with a home tie with Congo DR, but then beating Congo and Zimbabwe. However, they lost all on the road and finished third in the group. All right. So they were supposed to meet Zimbabwe again here. Zimbabwe finished on top of that group in 2019. 2021 was round one of one playoff knockout round with Chad. And Chad is always a team that provides drama. They're a pretty weak team, but something unusual always happens with Chad. In this case, it turned out to be each team winning at home 1-0, and the matter going to penalties. And usually it ends in heartbreak for Chad, but actually they won this one. So a bit of an embarrassing knockout there for Liberia. Okay, and just to clarify, in 2023, they didn't have to play in the preliminary round. Sorry, I didn't make a note of how many teams had to play in the preliminary round, but they managed to avoid that. I'm just guessing. It was about 10 or 12 teams. They were above those teams. Okay, well, let's take a look at players, and I really don't know much about them because I've never seen them in a tournament. But William Jabor got 3 of their 5 goals in 2019 qualifying, and that is kind of a name that's at least familiar to me. So I think he is scoring in qualifying. I'll just see if I can find him here and see why his name is familiar to me. I'm wondering if he is retired because I'm not seeing his name on the list. Interestingly, there's a name, Patrick Weah, and he plays in America. I'm just wondering if he's related to the famous George Weah, but it doesn't seem that way. Sorry. A lot of their players actually do play abroad. I'd say almost a third to a half of them, but for very small teams abroad, they seem to have a bit of a connection with the USA. So I see a couple of players playing in the USA there, and they have a defender, Oscar Dorley, who plays for Slavia Prague. That's a fairly big team in the Czech Republic. And smaller teams I see in Sweden. In Sweden here, one of them is that Saudi Arabia. Marcus Macaulay plays in Saudi Arabia. He's one of their more experienced players, as is the Oscar Dorley, who plays in Slavia Prague. And no big names here. They have Ayuba Kosaya, who's a young player with Breda in the Netherlands. And kind of an interesting collection of teams they play for. Oh, and then Mohamed Sanger is a 23-year-old who plays for Newcastle United. He only has 7 caps for Liberia. So, they seem to get around, but certainly no big names there. And the name I'm familiar with, William Jabor, I wonder if he has retired. Just looking for him here. And oh yeah, okay. He has retired. He has 16 caps for Liberia and 12 goals. So actually, doesn't have a lot of caps there, but that's a pretty good percentage, and possibly why his name is familiar with me. Okay, well, we'll move on to a summary, and then a discussion of their form. So they were very weak in their early campaigns when they actually completed those campaigns, which they often didn't. This weakness continued even with star George Weah joining the team in the late 80s, but his influence was felt, and abruptly so, with a strong campaign that led them into a strong period until 2002. And it featured two African Cup appearances and a very close approach to the 2002 World Cup. But they returned to weakness after he left, perhaps a bit stronger than before because they earn a smattering of points, mostly at home, but they're not really. They haven't really shown competitiveness at the campaign level until a surprising run in 2017, although that wasn't sustained after that. So that sudden competitiveness in 2017 did have lingering effects into 2019, but a weak World Cup campaign and a knockout at the hands of Chad in 2021 make it seem like that was a flash in the pan. They remain reasonably strong at home, though, and are always a threat there. But neither that nor the improvement in 2017 lifted them into the top half of a group campaign. Okay, well, we will move on to part three. Part three, where we begin by looking at the rankings. So we see Morocco is 22nd in FIFA and 24th in ELO, so fairly similar. South Africa, 69th in FIFA. That puts them about 50 points behind Morocco. And 70th in ELO. So both systems kind of seeing them around 70th. However, Liberia is different. FIFA has them at 149th, and ELO has them at 128th. There, I'm trying to decide which one I agree with more. But anyway, I think it doesn't matter because I think they're really outclassed in this group here. If we look at the FIFA and ELO rankings, we saw Morocco is 24th. They were all the way down to 77th in 2015. And actually, for several years around that time, they were in the 70s. So they're definitely in a good period. They rose up kind of steadily from the 60s to the 50s to the 40s. And actually, it's only in the last year that they've moved from 41st to 24th in ELO rankings. South Africa are 69th and 70th, as we saw. They were as high as 50th in June 2017 and as low as 82nd in 2008. But of course, their best period was around 2002 when they were in the 40s. And I'm using the more reliable ELO rankings. If we look at the FIFA rankings, they reached all the way up to 20th in December 2000 and were 30th in 2002 when ELO had them as 40th. So the FIFA rankings kind of a bit more volatile than the ELO rankings. Okay, finally, Liberia. FIFA has them all the way, breaking 100, all the way up to 98th in December 2013. I can't remember us saying anything particular that they did in 2013 that would merit that. And certainly in FIFA rank or ELO rankings, they were around 130th, as they always seem to be. That was up from around 140th in around 2006 to 2008. In 2002, interestingly, they rose all the way up to 87th in both ranking systems. That was their strong period. Let's look at the head-to-head rankings, and we see that Morocco and Liberia have only met twice. That was in 1982. We pointed it out in the description, where Morocco won 3-0 at home and then 5-0 away. So that's the only time they've met. So Morocco, 2 wins, 0 losses, 0 ties. South Africa and Morocco is the ones that have met the most in this group. And South Africa actually has the better head-to-head with 2 wins, 2 draws, and 1 loss. We'll talk a little bit about that later. South Africa versus Libya. Sorry, not Libya, Liberia. In 2002, they met. That was a strong year for both of them, actually. 2002 African Cup qualifying. South Africa won at home and tied away. However, Liberia won the group, but South Africa also advanced in second. And finally, no, that's it. Morocco and Liberia. We've already done Morocco with the better record there. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about what we think is going to happen here. And actually, the grouping, especially with the disqualification of Zimbabwe, seems fairly set in stone to me, and it should finish according to the seeding. Morocco's consistency has been the key to success, especially in recent years, and that should easily see them through here. With Zimbabwe disqualified, really they only need to outperform Liberia to earn one of the top spots to get them to the cup. 2 spots available. That consistency will also probably see them finish ahead of South Africa, who are improving, in fact, but probably not enough to challenge Morocco, I would say. We saw that Morocco's ranked 50 points above them in the ranking systems, and they're more than 100 points ahead of Liberia. They do have that losing head-to-head with South Africa, but most of the points that South Africa earned there were during their strong years around the turn of the century. In their only recent meeting, we saw in the group stage in 2019, Morocco beat them. If South Africa's overall strength prevails, they should finish in second, with an outside chance of challenging Morocco for top spot. But if their luck continues to take the toll it has, they would have been leapfrogged by Zimbabwe here, who they were supposed to play in the last game. But maybe their luck has balanced out in making that impossible, Zimbabwe having been disqualified. So South Africa only has to outdo Liberia to reach this African Cup. However, they have been sideswiped by, or else they've legitimately struggled with teams of Liberia's level. But the consistency, if you take a close look, South Africa's consistency has been improving, and they should have no problem here, other than the gods of drama who seem to delight in toying with them. But the gods would have to side with them to take first place over Morocco here, although that's not out of the question either. It does seem out of the question, though, for Liberia. With Zimbabwe out, the challenge of overcoming another team seems pretty limited. Again, there's kind of an outside chance of, maybe South Africa providing another comedy of errors or some bad luck. Some home points, though, do seem possible because they're tough at home, Liberia. But even in the best of their recent campaigns, it wasn't enough to make them a challenger at the campaign level. So here we have it. My prediction for me, Morocco first, South Africa, and Liberia with little chance of it finishing any other way. But I never want to be too overconfident, especially with Africa, because in a way it's my favorite region because the most unexpected things happen. Okay, well, we've finished the podcast with a prediction on the games to this point. So Zimbabwe was supposed to play Liberia, Zimbabwe at home there, but that's been cancelled. So we have actually a key game here, Morocco versus South Africa. Well, we've seen that Morocco is very, very tough at home. They kind of damaged their home record for a few years. I don't know if we mentioned this in the podcast, but they had a pristine home record. Malawi and Gabon managed to win there. Those were two of the only teams to win there. And then I think around 2014, around that time, they did lose a few games at home. But recently, they've become very tough at home again. So I'm not going to call anything against them here. I'm going to say this is a 2-0 win over 2-1 win over South Africa, with a mild chance of South Africa stealing a tie. Let's see what happened. Okay, this was a 2-1 win for Morocco. So South Africa got the first goal at 8 minutes in and held the lead for the first half. And then Morocco scored 51 minutes in, so 6 minutes after the second half began, and only won it on a goal at 88. So I must say that's, the expected result, but a bit of a confidence-inspiring result for South Africa there. And I do think they are going to prove a bit better this time around. I guess we won't see it in qualifying that much, but in the cup. In the second game, South Africa was supposed to play at home to Zimbabwe. That's been cancelled. And we have Liberia playing at home to Morocco. Well, odds makers would heavily favour Morocco here, but honestly, African teams at home, it would be always dangerous to bet against them. I'm not going to say that Liberia is going to get anything out of this, but it wouldn't surprise me if this was a draw. But I think Morocco is pretty consistent. So I'm going to say 2-0 Morocco. Let's see. Oh, I'm dead on. Woohoo! Morocco scoreless first half, and they got both of the goals very quickly with a penalty at 56 by Faisal Fajr. I'm never sure how to say his name. And then a minute later, Youssef En-Nesyri scored a second goal. So a 2-0 win. So yeah, it looks like things are heading towards the result we predicted. Morocco has played two games and won them both. South Africa is in second and Liberia is in third, but both of them are winless. So the next game, South Africa hosting Liberia in September, will be quite telling. Well, that brings us to the end of the podcast, and once again, I'll repeat how you can find us on the internet webs, and the best way is to go to type Soccer Files Canada into Google, and that's soccer SOCCERPHILES, Soccer Files with a PH. And our actual website is soccerfiles.captivate.fm, and you can find some good show notes there that can link you to previous podcasts with more information. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that very detailed discussion, and if you did, maybe we'll see you next time. All the best. Bye-bye.